At noon, the army stopped. Thousands of men lowered their shields onto the hot sand. Camels folded their legs beneath them. Water skins were opened carefully. Bread was divided. The officers gathered beneath temporary shades, while soldiers searched the empty horizon for any sign of the road ahead. There was nothing. No city, no trees, no enemy. Only a white sky resting above an endless desert. Then somewhere along the southern edge of the camp, a soldier noticed that the horizon had changed. At first, it looked like smoke, but there was no fire. Then it looked like a dark cloud, but it did not move like a cloud. It grew. It climbed. It covered the sky from the ground upward. The guides began shouting. Animals pulled against their ropes. The soldiers stood and reached for their weapons, but there was no enemy to fight. The thing moving toward them was larger than an army, larger than a city. It was the desert itself. A wall of sand rolled across the horizon. Daylight turned red, then brown, then black. The wind struck the camp. Tents vanished. Men were thrown against one another. Sand filled their eyes, their mouths, and their lungs. Orders disappeared beneath the roar. Standards were ripped from the hands of their bearers. The army that had crossed kingdoms could no longer see more than a few steps ahead. And then silence. According to an ancient story, 50,000 soldiers marched into the western desert of Egypt. They never reached their destination. They never returned. No messenger carried news of a defeat. No surviving commander explained what had happened. No enemy displayed their captured weapons. An army entered the desert, and history lost it. For more than 2,500 years, explorers, historians, and archaeologists have searched for the truth. Some believe the soldiers are still beneath the dunes. Some believe they were destroyed in battle. Others believe the entire story was created. Because there is one question the ancient account never fully answers. Can a sandstorm truly erase 50,000 men? Or was the storm only a story? To understand why this army entered the desert, we must travel east beyond the Nile. Beyond Mesopotamia, beyond the mountains of the Iranian plateau, there in the 6th century, a new power had appeared, the Achaemenid Persian Empire, a king whose victories transformed Persia from a regional kingdom into a vast imperial system. Cyrus conquered powerful states, absorbed ancient cities, and ruled over many different people. Medes, Babylonians, Lydians, Phoenicians, Greeks, living along the coast of Asia. Minor communities with different gods, languages, armies, and traditions now answered to one throne. When Cyrus died, the empire passed to his son. Cambyses II Cambyses inherited enormous power, but inherited power creates a particular kind of danger. A son who follows a legendary father does not only inherit a kingdom, its founder was Cyrus the Great. He inherits a comparison. Every decision is measured against the man who came before him. Every victory is considered smaller. Every mistake is remembered longer. Cambyses had the title, he had the army, he had the royal blood. But he still had to prove that he could expand the empire his father had created, and one wealthy, ancient, strategically important kingdom remained outside Persian-controlled Egypt. To the Persians, Egypt was more than land. It was the Nile that was trade. It was military prestige. It was one of the oldest kingdoms known to the ancient world. To conquer, Egypt would demonstrate that Cambyses was not simply the son of Cyrus. He was a king of kings in his own right. Herodotus later recorded several stories explaining why Cambyses invaded. One involved a royal marriage proposal. Another involved deception and insult. Another involved an Egyptian military advisor who abandoned his king and gave Cambyses information about Egypt's defenses. Those stories may preserve fragments of real political conflict, but empires rarely invade wealthy kingdoms because of only one insult. Cambyses wanted Egypt because Egypt mattered. In 525 BCE, the Persian king moved against it. Crossing the desert on Egypt's eastern frontier was dangerous. An army needed secure passage, guides, and access to water. According to Herodotus, Cambyses received help that allowed his forces to cross the dry region, separating the Persian-controlled territories from Egypt. The invasion succeeded. Egyptian forces under Pharaoh Psamtik III were defeated near Pelusium on the eastern edge of the Nile Delta. Egypt was absorbed into the Persian Empire. Cambyses had achieved what generations of foreign kings had desired. He had conquered the land of the pharaohs, but taking Egypt was only the beginning, because a kingdom can lose a battle without accepting its conqueror. And Cambyses was about to discover that the most dangerous resistance did not always come from armies. Sometimes it came from temples, sometimes it came from stories, and sometimes it came from a voice, speaking in the middle of the desert. After his victory, Cambyses stood at the center of a political contradiction. He was the conqueror of Egypt. But to rule Egypt effectively, he also had to become its pharaoh. That meant entering a system that had existed for thousands of years. The pharaoh was not simply a military ruler. He was connected to the gods, the temples, the land, and the sacred order of the universe. A foreign king could occupy the palace, but occupation alone did not create legitimacy. Egyptian priests controlled temples, archives, property, wealth, and traditions. They could present a conqueror as a rightful ruler, or they could remember him as a destroyer. Herodotus describes Cambyses as increasingly violent, reckless, and hostile to Egyptian religion. In his account, the Persian king insults sacred customs, mistreats priests, and eventually attacks the Apis bull, one of Egypt's most sacred animals. But this portrait is not universally accepted. Other surviving evidence suggests that Cambyses participated in Egyptian royal traditions. It also suggests that the relationship between the Persian administration and Egyptian religious institutions was more complicated than the image of a king driven completely by madness. This matters because history is not only a record of what happened, it is also a struggle over who gets to explain what happened. A defeated population may remember a conqueror as a monster. An empire may erase evidence of its failures. Priests may transform political resistance into a story about divine punishment. Kings may turn military disasters into natural catastrophes. And generations later, a historian may receive several versions of the same event without knowing which one is true. Somewhere west of the Nile stood a place with the power to influence how Cambyses was remembered. The Oasis of Siwa. Isolated by hundreds of kilometers of desert, Siwa was home to an oracle associated with the god Amun. People traveled to oracles to ask questions whose answers could change kingdoms. Should a ruler begin a war? Was a king legitimate? Had a god approved a political decision? Was a disaster the result of divine anger? An oracle was not simply an ancient fortune teller. It could be a political institution. Its words could strengthen a king or weaken him. A favorable declaration might transform conquest into destiny. An unfavorable declaration could encourage resistance, not as a pilgrimage, as a threat, not as a pilgrimage, as a threat. More than a century after Cambyses, Alexander the Great would cross the desert to consult the oracle at Siwa after conquering Egypt. The journey became part of his legend. But Cambyses' relationship with the oracle would be remembered very differently. The oracle at Siwa had survived kings, invasions, and centuries of desert silence. But Cambyses did not see it as a distant temple. He saw it as a challenge. According to Herodotus, the Persian king ordered an army to cross the western desert, enslave the people of Siwa, and burn the Oracle of Amun to the ground. The size of the force was said to be extraordinary: 50,000 men. The number may have grown as the story was repeated, but the message was clear. Cambyses was not sending a warning. He was sending enough soldiers to make resistance appear impossible. The army gathered at Thebes, one of Egypt's greatest cities. Behind them stood temples, columns, markets, and the green banks of the Nile. Ahead of them was a landscape with no walls to conquer and no army to defeat. only distance, heat, and the constant need for water. The soldiers came from many parts of the Persian Empire. Some were Persians. Others may have been Medes, Babylonians, Phoenicians, Greeks, or Egyptians, forced into imperial service. They did not share one language or one homeland, but they marched beneath the authority of one king. After leaving the oasis, the Persian army moved deeper into the western desert. At first, the march continued in order. The standard still rose above the column. The officers still trusted the guides. But the farther they traveled from known water, the more dangerous every mistake became. Soon, the guides began to disagree. One expected a rock formation that never appeared. Another believed they had drifted too far from the route. The officers watched in silence. For the soldiers, that silence was its own warning. The men leading them were no longer certain. Water was now more valuable than weapons. A spear could be replaced. A shield could be abandoned. But a single water skin might keep a man alive for one more day. Some containers were nearly empty. Some leaked. And every drop lost to the sand brought the army closer to disaster. At night, the desert became quiet. The heat faded. The stars filled the sky. While most of the soldiers slept, one man stayed awake. We can imagine Arta, a single unnamed soldier among thousands, sitting beside his shield and holding a small object from home, wondering if anyone truly knew the road ahead. Then came the final stage of the march. According to the ancient story, the army stopped around midday to eat. Shields were placed in the sand for shade. Camels rested. Officers studied the route. At first, the sky seemed empty. But somewhere on the southern horizon, a dark line had begun to form. It may have looked harmless at first. A shadow, a distant cloud, a blur above the sand. Then it grew wider, higher, darker. The guides understood before anyone else. They shouted for the soldiers to cover their faces and stay together. But the storm was already moving toward them. The wind struck first. Then came the sand. It tore through the camp. Animals pulled against their ropes. Banners bent and vanished. Men could no longer hear commands. They could barely see one another. The army that had crossed kingdoms was suddenly reduced to scattered individuals fighting the desert itself. The first days may have passed without disaster. The army marched in formation. Standards rose above the column. Scouts searched for the next landmark. But the farther they traveled, the more dangerous every mistake became. A small error in direction could add an entire day without water. Inside the storm, direction disappeared. There was no road, no horizon, no east or west. Only darkness, wind and sand filling the eyes, mouth and lungs. Arta reaches for another soldier. For one moment, their hands almost meet. Then the storm separates them. Water was rationed more carefully. The amount given to each man became smaller. Damaged equipment was abandoned. Animals that could no longer walk were left behind. Conversation disappeared from the column. The soldiers no longer asked when they would reach Siwa. They asked how far it was to water. And then, silence. According to Herodotus, the army never reached Siwa. It never returned to Egypt. The force sent to destroy the oracle simply vanished. What remained was not a battlefield, not a victory parade, and not a surviving report. Only a story. That story was recorded by Herodotus. He wrote decades later, not as a witness, but as a collector of memory. He tells us the army reached Oasis. After that, the account came from the people of Siwa and those who repeated their tradition. That detail matters. means the mystery begins where certainty ends. In Siwa, the story may have passed from one generation to the next. A priest, a traveler, a guide, a storyteller, each repeating the same idea. A mighty king threatened the oracle. The desert answered, and the army disappeared before it could strike. It is one of the most powerful legends in the ancient world, but legend is not proof. For centuries, explorers and archaeologists have searched the western desert. They looked for weapons, human remains, camps, and supply objects. Some discoveries created excitement, but none has produced final, accepted proof that Cambyses' lost army has truly been found. Then another possibility appeared. Archaeologists uncovered evidence for an Egyptian rebel ruler named Persian. He seems to have held power in the western oases. That changed the story. What if the Persian army was not destroyed only by nature? What if it was defeated by human enemies who knew the desert better? In that version, the army grows weaker with each mile. Water runs low. The route becomes uncertain. Then local forces strike at the right moment. A large imperial column, deep in hostile territory, could have been broken apart by fighters who understood every well, ridge, and hidden approach. There is even a darker theory. Perhaps the Persian Empire did not want the truth remembered. A storm is easier to explain than a humiliating defeat. A natural disaster cannot inspire revolt. But a rebel pharaoh who destroyed a Persian force could become a symbol. So any scene of officials erasing records is only a visualization of a theory, not a confirmed event. That leaves us with three main possibilities. The first, the army was overwhelmed by a catastrophic sandstorm. The second, it was defeated by Egyptian resistance in the oases. The third, a smaller disaster slowly grew into a larger legend until history and myth became impossible to separate. The truth may lie somewhere between them. An army weakened by thirst, guides uncertain of the way, a storm that shattered the column, an ambush that finished what the desert began. History often preserves clean endings. Real disasters are rarely so simple. Even the map refuses to answer us. We know Thebes. We can guess Oasis. We can trace possible routes toward Dakhla and Siwa. But between those points lies uncertainty. A blank zone in the desert. A place where a great army may have disappeared without leaving a clear final mark. And still, the desert keeps its secret. Perhaps somewhere beneath the dunes, a Persian spear still waits. A broken shield, a water skin, a line of bones no one has recognized. Or perhaps time and wind have scattered the evidence so completely that the truth will never be recovered. Cambyses conquered Egypt, but he could not control the story that followed. The oracle survived. The soldiers did not return. Herodotus recorded the storm. Archaeology uncovered rebellion, and the lost army remained suspended between history and legend. 50,000 men entered the desert. None returned to tell us what happened. If this story made you question what history left behind, subscribe to Unknown History. More vanished armies, forgotten civilizations, and buried mysteries are waiting to be uncovered.